From Oscar Steakhouse, inside the Plaza Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas, you're on the corner of Main Street. Welcome to the only podcast produced by and recorded in the Las Vegas Hotel Casino. From gaming to dining to entertainment to sports to Vegas history, this is the place to be for the inside scoop, because this is the place to be downtown. Now, here's Plaza CEO Jonathan Jossel.
Today we are joined by the president and CEO of the Las Vegas Super Bowl Host Committee, Sam Joffray. Welcome, Sam, to On the Corner of Main Street. How are you today?
Thank you for having me.
Sam, thank you for joining us. I'm sure there's many things as a guy who's making a major statement in Las Vegas could be doing today, so we appreciate you joining us here on the corner of Main Street. Do you know why we call this podcast On the Corner of Main Street?
I think because it's on the corner of Main Street.
We are sitting here in Oscar's Steakhouse, as we always are, on the corner of Main Street. This address is one Main Street where Las Vegas literally began. This was the first address, so we played on that history, and we've been doing this podcast now for almost 3 years. So
and it's great to be down here. When I first got to Vegas, this was the area I fell in love with. Coming from New Orleans after 25 years, and I stumbled upon downtown Vegas. I was like, this is my vibe.
Really?
This is exactly the kind of culture and experience and energy that I think adds a lot of excitement.
Have you ever eaten in Oscars?
I have not eaten at Oscars yet.
All right, we're gonna have to change that. Look at the shock on Gemini's face, and that we're gonna have to get you. We're gonna have to get you down here soon.
Be happy
to try it out. The best steakhouse in all of Las Vegas, in my humble opinion.
So I've heard.
Okay. So, Sam, tell us a little bit about how you got to Las Vegas and getting ready to host, probably the biggest event in Las Vegas for 2024.
It's exciting to put it that way. I spent the past 25 years in New Orleans working for a nonprofit called the Sports Foundation, our job was to attract and manage the sporting events on behalf of the city. So
in New Orleans,
New Orleans. Yeah. We'd put together the bids to host those events, and then once they're awarded, we would become the full-time host committee for those, because a lot of these major events require that you create a dedicated effort to fulfilling all the obligations that you made in the bid. So in New Orleans, we had this organization that was kind of in a rinse and repeat mode. We would bid on an event, host it, and then we're bidding on another one and hosting it. So that same core team stayed together for those 25 years and would do Super Bowl followed by Final Four, followed by NBA All-Star Game, and just it was a nice rhythm and routine that we had. Once Las Vegas got the stadium, that was kind of the catalyst to starting to get invited to bid on these major events. And I also have done work for the NFL for the past 26 Super Bowls in another capacity as a vendor and a consultant. So I was working at Super Bowl in Tampa during COVID, and my phone rang. It was from Brian Yost, the COO over at the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority. And he said, I got your number from the NFL. We're staring down the barrel of a 186-page bid document to host Super Bowl, and wanted to see if you might be available to kind of help us navigate this, play therapist. We weren't quite sure what role they needed me for yet, but quickly learned that I could take that experience and that playbook from New Orleans and steal it and bring it here to Vegas. Took very little sell to get me to pack up and move here and do this full time, because as I was sitting there saying, we went for how many years without being able to say Vegas and the Super Bowl in the same sentence.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And now here we are with the first one. It was just too historic of a milestone and too exciting an opportunity.
So you're living in Vegas now?
Been here since 2020. January of 22, I moved in full time.
How are you enjoying it?
Oh, it's incredible. It's incredible.
It's a good city, isn't it?
Not just the city, not just the tourism and the hospitality, but just the community itself. People make a place.
Right.
And we're lucky here in Vegas that there's so many people who at one point moved here themselves that there's almost like this obligatory requirement as a Las Vegan to make sure that you go out of your way to help welcome new people to the destination. I was no example. A lot of arms opened up to me, and it's been a lot of fun.
So being from New Orleans, are you born there originally?
Born and raised.
So you're a Saints fan?
I got a little black and gold in my blood.
So you and I have something in common. I'm a Saints fan too.
All right, who dat?
Who dat nation? No, because being from, being from England, I did not appreciate American football or NFL for the longest time. And then in 2008, I'd been living here for about a year, and a friend of mine was like, you got to watch this game. And I was like, I don't want to watch American football. It takes too long. Didn't get it, didn't understand it. I was at his house, and he said, well, let's just, try watch this game. And it was a Saints game, and they were playing, I believe it was Seattle. And it was 2008, and Reggie Bush did 2 punt returns.
Yep.
And I was like, I think I'm a football fan. And so that was like my intro into it. But I have to say, now being the CEO of a hotel and casino, I don't know that there's anything more important than understanding American sports as it interrelates to our business. I mean, everything is intertwined from, you mentioned March Madness or NCAA basketball. Final Four, you mentioned Super Bowl. These events are our biggest events by far from a hotel casino perspective. So there's so much interconnectedness between sports and Vegas that it was almost ironic that they didn't let us cross-promote the two things.
Yeah, and sports tourism has, probably in the past 15 years become a really vital part of the economy, a very competitive part of the economy, to where cities are competitively bidding to host these events. And now that Vegas not only has the stadium, but that the national trend on sports wagering has kind of been adopted, that, the city is primed for an incredible decade worth of hosting these major events. Super Bowl's just the first one, but as you've seen, F1 and...
Do you follow the sports betting? Do you have an interest in that, or is it?
I found it pretty fascinating. I'm a technology guy, so I got on that just to see the platform, to see how it was working, kind of compare the apps, see what the offerings were. So I'll do a little wagering on F1 just because I kind of got a little routine and a system.
You have a good system on that? You have to share that with me.
We'll come back for another podcast and talk about that.
F1 betting system.
It's basically based on anybody but Verstappen.
Right. Okay, that's a good strategy.
Gives me a good reason to watch it gives you another reason to watch the event. It really is kind of a legitimate, adding a layer of excitement to watch on any given Sunday, that you can at least have another reason to root against Verstappen.
I mean, it's had a huge impact on our business. I mean, there's a hotel and casino across the street that was literally built around sports, soccer. You really have a whole city that's changed, not just because we have these sports teams, but the sports betting has just become nationwide now. So if you come to Vegas and you sports bet with Caesars, you can go home and carry on that same account in so many different states now, where it's really spreading and making it a much more widely accessible market, where people used to think it would hurt Vegas. I think it only helps Vegas as more and more states legalize sports betting. It's going to help Vegas.
I mean, it's kind of great to walk up to the window and buy a ticket, but at the same time, the in-game experience has gotten pretty crazy. It's just a whole new dynamic to it.
Yeah. So you mentioned, and I know, Gary, you have an agenda, so whenever you want to jump in and go.
No, you're fine. Good.
But you mentioned the LVCVA. They approached you.
Yes. They had. So the process for attracting a Super Bowl it's a bid process. The short version of the story is I just, for New Orleans, put together the bid to host Super Bowl in 2024. Finished that process. We put some fine print language in that bid that said, oh, by the way, if the NFL goes to a 17-game season and shifts the Super Bowl by a week, you're going to land on top of Mardi Gras and New Orleans can't host.
Wow.
If that happens, then New Orleans gets a chance to bid on the next available Super Bowl. So they got in 24 awarded, then went through the process of redoing it all to get 25 awarded for New Orleans because that scenario played out, which left a hole in the calendar for Super Bowl in 2024. Vegas was perfectly primed with the new stadium. The timing was perfect. They got invited to bid on 24 to fill that calendar. So it really left us. I went from bidding twice for New Orleans to coming here and putting together the bid, which in the timeline only left us about 2 years between the time the NFL owners voted to award it to Vegas to the time that we're going to kick off, and that's a pretty unprecedented short runway to pull this off.
Did New Orleans get 25?
Yes.
Is there an argument to be made, in your opinion, that one day, given the scale of Vegas, its ability to host events is untouched anywhere in the world, it just becomes Vegas is the home of the Super Bowl?
I don't think you'll ever see the home every year, but what we used to have when I first started was this kind of unofficial rotation where New Orleans, Miami, and San Diego were constantly invited to bid, and about every third year it kind of followed this unofficial rotation of Miami, New Orleans, San Diego, and then they'd plug in a fourth city. And then they kind of go back to Miami, New Orleans, San Diego, and then a fourth city.
Yeah.
I think what you're going to see now that with all the new stadiums coming online, definitely going to celebrate anytime there's a new stadium coming online. So you have to kind of keep that flexibility. But the NFL is kind of taking a new approach to saying, what's the best year and the best city for the Super Bowl in any given time? With convention calendars like cities like New Orleans and Miami and Vegas have, you can't always host a Super Bowl because the requirements are so. You could permanently, I guess, carve out 2 to 3 weeks every year to do it, but you're displacing some other business. So really the best case scenario, I think, would be that if New Orleans and Vegas and Miami reinvigorated that
rotation,
historical unofficial rotation pattern to wherever.
I don't know. LA may have something to say with that.
Yeah, I think the West Coast cities are now getting more competitive. So you've got San Diego, LA, and Phoenix, all capable Super Bowl hosts.
Also, Jerry's World in Dallas. It's another big one that's always going to want to host.
They had their housewarming Super Bowl back in 2011.
I like that housewarming. Minnesota got their housewarming, but I don't think
it's a housewarming gift.
Yeah,
you got 32 owners, and whenever somebody builds a new stadium, it's kind of like their housewarming gift to each other.
I like that.
Is that part of the requirements when they actually build the new stadium? Is that they will, I guess, be in the running for a Super Bowl, or that they will get one in a certain period of time?
It's not in writing anywhere, but it is a consideration that because at the end of the day, no matter how good the bid is, how bad the bid is, if the NFL owners, all 32 of them, want to send a Super Bowl somewhere, they will.
Right.
They vote.
Gary, it's like you move in your house. There's no written rule your friends are going to bring you a housewarming gift, but it's the right thing to do.
That's true. Yeah.
It's like New York got it, but there's
a big difference.
It's freezing cold.
There's a big difference between somebody bringing me a toaster and bringing the economic impact of the Super Bowl.
Yeah, they're always going to want to share the wealth on that event, but I do think you're going to start to see that perfectly positioned cities like Las Vegas has demonstrated for Pro Bowls and drafts and those other events to help fill in the calendar. But really, it's up to Vegas to look at it and say, when do we want Super Bowl? When does it help us?
Right.
When does it make the most sense? Because it's already the second biggest weekend of the year here.
So that is a question I wanted to come to in a minute. Let's just talk about it now. I'm worried about Super Bowl because it's already our busiest weekend of the year, right? I mean, maybe it's second busiest. Sure. What are you putting as first?
New Year's Eve.
Yeah, for us, gaming-wise, Super Bowl's bigger.
But if we look at the hotel compression, we couldn't have bid on Super Bowl if we didn't have the capacity.
Right.
So there were just enough hotel rooms to be able to be carved out to not displace those annual customers that you guys had. That was a big sensitivity of ours. No, we don't want to bring the Super Bowl here and displace your regular business. So there was just enough bandwidth left over. Now in 2024, I think you're going to find that will be the biggest weekend of the year, and we will be at full capacity.
Yeah.
But no.
So there's no fear that it's already one of the say you're right, second busiest weekend of the year. Is there no fear that it's just when you peak the peak too great? Like, is it a danger that you overprice the average person? You make it too much traffic, too much compression. You can't get restaurant reservations. Like we're seeing from probably going to have airfare through the roof.
Yeah.
Hotel prices already are through the roof.
That's going to be the unknown. There are a lot of unknowns about the Super Bowl because it's the first one we've done. So it's not like we have even one or two previous Super Bowls to go back and look at the data. So when we bid, the stadium wasn't even open yet. We didn't have fans at the stadium yet. So we didn't know how many ushers it took or public safety or transportation plans. We had none of that to work off of. So a lot of that still goes to say with how Vegas is going to treat that piece of business. So what the airlines are going to do, what the hotels are going to do, we do know that, priority is going to be to take care of your customers that come every year.
Right.
If that results in the remaining inventory being more expensive than any other year, and the Super Bowl customers are still willing to support that, then I think that's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
The traveling base for Super Bowl is very corporate, very high-end, a bigger spend than what I think you're going to see in a regular Super Bowl year.
Yep.
So if that drives those rates up, we'll have to see what that does and what the disposition is from the NFL and those stakeholders at the end of the day to say, what were our revenues like? What was our piece of business like? And then they'll make educated decisions.
Probably also does have although all teams have a decent enough fan base, but some teams we've seen, like from the casino side, if Green Bay's in the Super Bowl, we're going to have a problem because the whole of Green Bay might come.
Well,
it depends on which teams make it.
Yeah, a lot of that still goes to the fact that the core constituency of people coming for a Super Bowl every year are corporate sponsors, media, network. The available even tickets for the game that are there, once you start carving out those allotments, the two teams rarely move the needle that much. Certainly, there are some teams that move the needle huge. Don't get me wrong.
You're right.
But the core business of Super Bowl is a corporate. You're going to see parties and events here like nothing else.
Like we've never had. Or maybe like F1.
Yeah.
So you said that there was still some bandwidth from an occupancy perspective to bring the Super Bowl here. What are your guys' projections? Do you think the Super Bowl is going to bring to Las Vegas from a room's perspective?
So I know, during the bid process, we looked at that very closely. We had to contract 23,000 hotel rooms during the bid process to guarantee the NFL that they have the core number of rooms they need at a reasonable rate. All the casino properties and hotel properties were very accommodating to help us do that, or otherwise we wouldn't have been able to finish the bid process if we weren't able to offer that. We worked closely with Applied Analysis during the bid process. The LVCVA did some really deep dives on economic impact estimates. Very comfortable it's going to be at least $700 million economic impact for the year, if not more. So, again, we don't have the previous data.
And that's over like a 3 or 4 day window?
Over that weekend.
Just the weekend, just Friday, Saturday, Sunday?
Yeah, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Okay.
Most of the Super Bowl events will start in earnest on Thursday night with NFL Honors, which is their big award show. So you see a lot of people that start coming in on Thursday now. The media start arriving as soon as the Saturday or Sunday a week prior. So about 6,000 members of the media that will be here in Vegas. And that's the impact that we can't even put a number on. Once you start talking about 6,000 members of the media broadcasting for a solid week at Radio Row, on their podcasts, TV stations,
right.
The writers that are here, the hopefully positive media publicity that we generate that week. Samantha from our staff will be working with her whole committee to make sure we're taking advantage of every one of those opportunities to get in front of the media, give them the message points, and tell the stories that we want to be told that week.
So you're going to be the best contact for us to be able to get onto Media Row for Super Bowl weekend?
I would think that if you're local and you've got a podcast with this history and these numbers, that you would certainly get credentialed to broadcast from there. If not, we'll have you broadcast from our booth, because we'll have a booth there, and we'll be able to accommodate you there.
So you mentioned LVCVA a couple of times. What is the technical relationship between the host committee and the LVCVA? Because we had LVCVA on the podcast, we've had LVE on the podcast, and obviously there's a connection between those two. In that LVCVA funds LVE, how does host committee fit into that?
So by design, once you are awarded the Super Bowl, you have to create a separate 501c6 nonprofit organization. In our case, it's called the Las Vegas Super Bowl Host Committee. That's a full-time staff, its own budget, its own fundraising mechanisms to fulfill all these obligations with the NFL. So once it was awarded, we created that executive committee, which is made up of the LVCVAs on that board, the Raiders, some county commissioner representation, business community, hotel representation. So that core host committee, executive committee, oversees everything that we as a nonprofit are managing in the course of this 2-year period. From there, we have 11 subcommittees that have volunteer chairs in each area of discipline. So there's a committee for transportation, a committee for public relations, a committee for 9,000 volunteers we have to recruit and manage. Of those 11 subcommittees, we've got either 2 or 3 co-chairs on each committee, followed by anywhere from 20 to 40 members of the committee, all volunteering from around the destination. So all in all, we've got over 300 volunteer, best of the best experts from the destination that are helping our staff, our full-time staff of about 14, to meet all these obligations.
So does and that sounds like a lot of work. And you're in charge of all of that.
Just managing the committees is a lot of work.
Right. And do you have to report back to LVCVA on a regular basis?
Yeah, they're integral in the process. We have monthly board meetings that they are certainly a financial stakeholder with us as well. So when we bid, we had obligations to the NFL that totaled about $55 million. That's everything from providing the stadium at no cost, the public safety, the transportation, the team hotels, venues. We have to manage 9,000 volunteers, welcome 6,000 members of the media. So all in all, it's about $55 million worth of things that we're doing for the benefit of for the obligations to the NFL and for the benefit of the community. We've got a lot of community affairs programming up in there. During that process, the LVCVA approved to backstop our bid up to $40 million worth of that 55.
Oh, wow. Okay. So they're big stakeholders.
Yeah, they're big stakeholders.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we're not going to tap them for that full backstop. So we have a private fundraising effort where we're selling sponsorships, hospitality packages. We're having fundraising initiatives, donors, events. So we're hoping to raise 20 to 25 of that privately and reduce the amount of funding that the LVCVA has to contribute. Because at the end of the day, that's public funding. And we certainly don't want 100% publicly funded Super Bowl, but the money had to be there to say that in a worst case scenario, if we had another COVID year, there's some reason why we couldn't fundraise.
Please no.
Yeah, that the money was there and in place in the form of a guarantee. So From that standpoint, they're absolutely integral, and we couldn't have even bid without the LVCA saying we will make sure that we can guarantee those funds will be there.
And has your role started to ramp up? Like, what does a day in the life of Sam look like at this point? Or do you not, like when the season starts and you get a better indication of the teams, or is it ramped up already?
Yeah, like when does it actually start? When do you start planning for an event?
Well, our staff came on board over the course of the past year. We've had 2 site visits to LA and Phoenix to start studying things. We took Maestro. We took some committee chairs. We took our team out to start studying those things at previous Super Bowls. So really, I would say our full-time, real effort, February of this year in Phoenix, we had about 44 people down there studying every aspect of Super Bowl. Coming back, our office is fully staffed now.
Where are your offices?
We're with the UFC at the UFC Apex.
Oh, okay.
They're one of the first partners we brought on board, and as part of that deal, they offered us some pretty nice office space at the Apex.
I bet they're nice, yeah.
Yeah. Really great partners. So that's a good example of how companies have been able to help us without not necessarily being a $1 million host committee sponsor, but being a good partner with us. A lot of those types of partnerships in town.
Right.
And so with Las Vegas kind of being that entertainment capital, how does a bid like this compare to New Orleans? With so much infrastructure that we already have. I guess New Orleans probably has a lot of that infrastructure in place now.
Has a lot of similarities to Vegas when it comes to putting on a Super Bowl in the sense of the compact footprint, the walkability. There are a lot of the things that are immediate budget savers for New Orleans right out of the gate versus you mentioned Dallas earlier where your practice sites might have been 20 minutes in each direction and media are being driven around here to there. Or
that was exactly, I don't know if you know, but the NFR that comes here in December, they tried to steal it from us in Texas. And when they got it the year of COVID, they were able to take it because we were basically still shut down. But everyone said it wasn't the same. You had to travel 20, 30 minutes. The hotels were all spread apart. It didn't have the same feeling that you get in Vegas where everything's basically 5 minutes away.
Right. And don't get me wrong. We love to call Las Vegas a walking city, but at the end of the day, Super Bowl guests on Super Bowl Sunday probably aren't going to walk all the way from Resorts World to the stadium. So we're going to have transportation that we still have to do. I would say that Vegas is probably, back to your question, probably about 40% more expensive to pull off than New Orleans. Some of that's because of the full-time organization I mentioned before that doesn't have to go create an office and get copiers and hire staff.
Right.
So that's a little chunk of our budget. But the transportation costs are much simpler. There's a proven we have a proven experience with hosting major events. So whether it is New Year's Eve or VGK parades, Vegas can activate these things very quick.
I hope Tropicana Bridge is done by then. The Tropicana exit ramp is fixed by then.
We just need a couple lanes.
That's just a couple lanes would be nice. Have you talked to the Boring Tunnel about putting some tunnels to the stadium? I know
they have been for the past year working on their plans. We don't have it integral to the Super Bowl yet because the numbers just aren't there yet.
Yeah.
And I don't think the assets are even.
I don't think it's going to be ready if it's not done by now.
But our Super Bowl transportation plan is a great example of something that we're spending probably an hour out of my day just on transportation. And then we're also managing a number of community affairs programs and initiatives from recruiting those volunteers to creating a program for local disadvantaged businesses to make sure they're part of the RFP process. So a lot of that work stays locally, youth programming, environmental programs.
I'll give you an amazing idea for free. There's a train track right here on Main Street, right next to the plaza. There's the train track that used to bring people to downtown all the way from Utah, connected Utah to California back in the day. Now it's just a freight train. For Super Bowl week, what we should do is we should get permission from UP, Union Pacific Railroad.
Union Pacific, yeah.
And put passenger carts, what are they called? Passenger...
Trains.
Yeah, but they have a special... passenger trains on the tracks of the plaza. Have everyone park downtown and then shuttle them by little trains down to the stadium, which literally lands in front of the arena.
Well, I actually did take a look at that.
Okay.
The distance of the tracks to the
it's right there.
To the stadium. Still a little bit of a trek. I think we can get people a little bit closer via regular vehicles. And then, there's a lot of back and forth that I don't know if on a train track we can pull off the number of cars that we would need going back and forth and back.
All right, I tried.
But I love the idea. I love the way you're thinking. That's how we're constantly thinking that way right now. It's kind of a what if mentality. We said that all the time ago. What if we did this? What if we did that? And that's part of the excitement of is creating this thing from scratch for the first time. Not just dusting off the plans from the last Super Bowl and saying, here's what worked and here's what didn't, and we just have to tweak this now. Creating all this from scratch is a great pride of authorship.
You mentioned it, but what do you think about VGK and the A's? Any thoughts on them?
Oh, I think it's been amazing to see the community support for those teams. And it inspired us to make sure that in our planning for the host committee, one of the things we're doing is how do we make sure that I like to say our goal at the host committee is on Monday morning after the Super Bowl that two things happen. One, the NFL stakeholders, which are the owners, the media, the sponsors, the fans, the teams, that they're all saying, that was freaking awesome. How fast can we come back to Vegas? But at the same time, we want to make sure that Las Vegas, the businesses, the youth, the tourism industry, all of every stakeholder locally is also saying that was awesome. How fast can we get the Super Bowl to come back? Yeah. So one of the things that we've seen is that community enthusiasm and excitement about the VGK and the Aces is how do we bring the Super Bowl out to the community? In different ways. You know, we're definitely doing grant programs for nonprofits to make sure that we're supporting a lot of the stuff that's happening in the community throughout the year, to some specific fan engagement events that we'll be announcing this summer, but extending the Super Bowl footprint beyond the Strip, beyond Allegiant Stadium, but taking it out to North Las Vegas, to Summerlin, to Henderson.
To downtown.
I was going to say, what's the plan for downtown?
There will be a very sexy plan for downtown.
Oh, I like that.
Good. Yeah.
I like the sexy plan downtown. That sounds good. Okay, hold on. And Gary, you jump in if you want, but can you share any scoop with us on this podcast?
It depends on
who
you're
is.
gonna ask me about halftime show.
Who is your halftime show?
You're going to ask me about halftime show.
Pretend the PR's not here.
We as the host committee have very, very, very little influence.
Oh, it's NFL.
It's more than just even NFL. It's the producer, Jay-Z's production company, plays a big role in that. Apple Music is the sponsor for it. So very high-level discussions, high-level negotiations now. We do get a little bit of a seat at the table to say that we want to make sure that it's culturally appropriate for Las Vegas and it's sending the message that we want to. If it was up to me, I'd love to see them go back to the old days of not just one halftime show performer, but maybe kind of a celebration of Vegas entertainers. Uh-huh. If you had
Celine Dion,
the best of residencies, not just Celine, but
Elton.
Maybe it's all the greatest halftime show reappearances that are now have had a history in Vegas.
Yeah.
Who knows? But
I think the Killers can make an appearance. I mean, if you go back
so obvious though, isn't it?
Well, no, but it was really special when they did Monday Night Football.
Yeah,
the opening night for Allegiant Stadium. I mean, they did it up on Caesars, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have a feeling they'll be pretty busy that weekend.
Okay.
Yeah. They'll have plenty to do that weekend if they want it.
I agree with you.
The number of parties and festivals and fan engagements.
So
great ambassadors.
Speaking of the Super Bowl committee and even us just saying the word Super Bowl in Las Vegas is somewhat strange, right? I mean, every party that's promoted is the big game.
Big game.
So, and I don't know if
can we say Super Bowl now?
Can we say Super Bowl this year?
In certain contexts, we'll be able to say Super Bowl.
Okay.
The NFL IP only extends to the host committee because we are contractually bound with the NFL.
Okay.
We have to, when we're approaching sponsors, we have to play by their rules and not compete with their sponsors. And the licensing for the word Super Bowl will come into play for some of those partners. But you'll see what we're doing when we announce this summer. Some of the things that we're doing, we'll definitely have the word Super Bowl very big on them. And if you play by the right rules, exceptions can be made. So I think you're still going to have to call them big game viewing parties throughout the destination when you have your on-property events. But the words Super Bowl in Las Vegas will be synonymous by February 12th of 2024. They'll go hand in hand.
Gemini has a question.
Well, usually what we have found is that if you're doing something media-based and you're reporting it and it's more news-based, you can get away with Super Bowl.
Editorially.
But if you are talking about somebody, if you're doing a list of people who are having parties, then it's considered advertisement and you have to use big game. That's what we've run into in the past.
If you're trying to make a buck off the Super Bowl, you can't use the word. So if it's monetized, then that's where that comes into play.
Okay. So just paint a picture for us. What does Super Bowl week look like in Vegas?
Super Bowl week will kind of traditionally kick off on Monday night. That's called opening night. It's a big event where the media get their first access to the two teams. So on Monday night, the two teams will come in. There will be media availabilities with all the players. Those 6,000 members of media will all be in the same space together with them, interviewing them for the first time. Tuesday night will be the host committee's opportunity to welcome the media, and we'll do a very large media party for those 6,000 members of the media and try and set the tone for the week with them, set the tone for coverage, set the tone for how much fun they're going to have. It's our opportunity to talk about the destination, to brag about the culture here. Wednesday will be some of the private events start on Wednesday. We'll do another media event on Wednesday for kind of a VIP exclusive media event. Then starting Thursday, you start to see the official NFL events start to happen, the rest of them. So NFL Honors, which is broadcast on the NFL Network, will take place that night. Friday night is a slew of corporate events from NFL commissioners. It used to be called the Commissioners Party. It's not called the Friday Night Party for a lot of those constituents. But then you'll see fan access events, celebrity parties. If you look at Phoenix in the past couple of years, Shaquille O'Neal has a big party. Sports Illustrated has a big party. Gronk has a big party. A lot of these things will be happening all weekend long. But Friday will also mark the opening of a fan event called the NFL Experience, or the Super Bowl Experience, excuse me. That will be a ticketed event for families with interactives with the kids. And, we were joking earlier about not being.
Will that be at Allegiant or will that be offsite?
It will be at a very large venue to be announced this summer. It's been around for years. It's the locals' opportunity to go and kick field goals and try on helmets and kids' activities, autograph sessions, a lot of great fan activation things. It's funny because it's one of those events that, again, here in Vegas. And now with the sports betting popularity and the NFL's adoption of sponsors in that space, for years, again, we couldn't say Super Bowl and Vegas or gambling in the same sentence. But last year, for the first time at that event, you had two very large national online sports platforms that were activating at the front door of it. And as you walked up, the first thing was kick a field goal to win $5 in free play. So you saw the dads were in line to kick a field goal while the kids were standing on the side. Come on, Dad, let's go. It's time to get going.
Yeah.
And
at least they weren't letting the kids kick the goal for $5.
Right. So then, Saturday will be another rinse and repeat. But, peppered in there all week long, you're going to see ribbon cuttings. You're going to see charitable events. You're going to see community activations. There'll be no shortage of things going on the entire week.
Unbelievable. Sure.
And then Sunday, there's this little thing called the game that happens.
Right.
So Vegas will be the first city to host the draft, the Pro Bowl, and the Super Bowl, right?
I think you're technically correct there. Yeah.
Hold on. That year, are we doing the Pro Bowl here?
We did it last year.
I know we did last year, but I thought they made Vegas the Pro Bowl exclusive home in the future. Like it used to be in Hawaii.
No, they still entertain other sites. I don't think they've announced where it's going in 2024.
This year it can't be here at the Super Bowl.
It could be if it was off-site and if it was at another venue, but I think that announcements are coming pretty soon on where it's going to be this year.
If it wasn't at Allegiant, where would you put it?
Well, the event's kind of morphed now. It's the Pro Bowl games instead.
Right.
So it's more of a made-for-TV and fan inclusion, but it's skills challenges and flag football. So it's kind of opened up their opportunities for where can we take this. And there are a lot of those cities around the country that can't or maybe will never host a Super Bowl, but the draft and Pro Bowl are those kind of opportunities for the NFL to go engage with them as well. So,
I mean, the draft was good in Vegas, but it wasn't what everyone thought it was going to be.
Yeah, but it was
Super Bowl is going to be what everyone thinks it's going to be. It's going to be the
draft was a really impressive event in person and on TV. It was really good.
I don't mean in terms of the execution operation. I just meant in terms of the visitation that everyone thought.
Needle as much
everyone thought it was going to be like the busiest weekend in the history of Vegas, and it just wasn't. But I think in terms of from the football side and the operation side, I'm sure that was perfectly done.
And it was it was a really good relationship building for the league and their staff and their vendors and contractors to start to know the city, know how to navigate things. Worked out a lot of permitting kinks, operational public safety things. So it's kind of like the dating period. If the NFL and the Super Bowl Super Bowl in Vegas, we're finally getting married. With Super Bowl, the draft, and the Pro Bowl are kind of that courtship.
Right. Makes sense.
And we're the wedding planners, by the way.
Yeah, you're the wedding planners.
That's really our role.
I like that.
We are wedding planners. We're dealing with the bridezilla and picking the venues and the colors and sending out the invites and doing all the fun.
Well, we would love to help you with that. If there's anything we can do in downtown to help you with that, we'd love to be a part of it.
Like I said at the beginning of this, I think that downtown is going to be an integral part of the experience for anybody coming to Super Bowl that weekend, and there'll be no shortage of really cool stuff down here to help celebrate it.
Well, thank you.
All right, I just have 2 more questions. One, it kind of goes back to your bid for the New Orleans Super Bowl. What was that experience like? Because that was the year of the blackout when the Ravens played the Niners.
Yeah.
So how operationally
that doesn't reflect on you, does it?
No, it doesn't. But it certainly sticks with you for a very long time. It becomes, yeah. That was an interesting one. It was halftime. It just we kind of, as host committees with the Super Bowls, once the kickoff happens, you pretty much stretch out and go, okay, now it's a game. We're there. We're very proud of everything that happened that week. It was an incredible week. We actually set off that week with a media strategy and a goal to say we want the media saying that Super Bowl should be in New Orleans every year. And that this is a perfect Super Bowl. We touted it as our perfect 10th Super Bowl all week long. That messaging was actually happening. There were headlines. There were story quotes about that. Everybody was just talking about how awesome this is going to be. And then that day, it was like, oh, man, they're saying too much stuff. It had jinx written all over it. Got into halftime. Halftime show was great. And then I'd actually stepped outside with my wife, who was going to head out, and I was telling her goodbye, and the phone started blowing up. I'm looking around at the lights, and it was a pretty crazy moment. But the real part of that story that not enough people talk about is the fact that basically within 18 minutes they had that thing identified, diagnosed, fixed, and up and running. It took a little bit longer for the systems to come back online. But when you think about venues this big and so many points of failure for something like that they actually did, that's the real story, is that they didn't have to pause the game that night and resume it the next day. That they got that.
Jeez, that would have been insane.
While the whole world is watching in complete darkness.
It was the longest 18 minutes.
They blamed their loss on that, didn't they? The
Niners.
The Niners.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
But I think that was Flacco's game. Anyway, as we're kind of wrapping up, and we appreciate your time, Sam. We always ask our guests, what type of advice would you give somebody kind of getting into the marketing world or into the sports world? What type of advice?
Or any advice.
I give it all the time. Move to Vegas.
Move to Vegas.
Wow.
I've been telling people from students to coworkers, colleagues around that this city is exploding. The future for sports tourism here and the vital part that sports is playing in the economy, between teams, venues, everything that's happening here, prime location to be. And that's what a lot of getting into this industry is about being at the right place at the right time. And there's no shortage of opportunities to get into ticketing, to get into marketing, to get with a venue. But, one thing I love about Vegas, it's a lot like New Orleans, is that you really are kind of 1 degree of separation from anybody else here. Mm-hmm. And once you get here, if you do your job and you excel and you're really good, there's no reason you can't navigate this city. And for somebody looking to work in sports, I think it's a mecca right
Well,
now.
I want to tell you that, 1, that's great advice. And 2, we've been doing this 3 years and no one's ever said that. And that's pretty cool. We sometimes get the same advice, but that's really, I tell people Vegas is like the last frontier. We're building a city here that just doesn't exist, and the opportunities here are endless.
Yep.
And you don't get that in pretty much anywhere else in this country. But honestly, I've lived in England and other places in the world. It's hard to find a city with as much potential as Las Vegas. So good advice, Sam.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
So
It worked for me.
Right.
So we look forward to you, I guess, bidding for future Super Bowls for Las Vegas. Is that the plan?
Let's get the first one right first, and then we'll see what happens afterwards. But
We'll have to do
every
it.
bit of focus right now is making sure we get this one right and that we knock it out of the park, and then we'll see what the future holds after
We'll have
that.
to do an episode after the Super Bowl with him to see how it went.
As long as the lights stay.
As long as there's lights on
stay
during
on.
the game. Thank you so much.
All
Sam.
right.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for joining us.
What about his social? How do you stay up to date with Sam and the host committee?
So did you have a private social media? I'm still new to this. This was
I know.
Lisa's spot. So
Website is LV as in Las Vegas, Super Bowl, HC as in hostcommittee.com. And then on social, we are at LV Super Bowl HC.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Are you a fan of On the Corner of Main Street? You're listening, so we'll assume that's a yes. So share the love, rate, review, and tell a friend to subscribe. Also, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at PlazaPod, on Facebook, Plaza Podcast, and feel free to write to the man himself at Jonathan Jossel. We'll see you next time, right here on the corner of Main Street.